What if you are exactly what they spent centuries trying to prevent? What if they knew about your wings, and that is why they built the cage? You were born free, and they are spending your whole life trying to fix that. This documentary is the glitch in the social matrix. From their perspective, you were never meant to know this. Who are they? We will cover it thoroughly. But first, we will concentrate on the question they do anything to prevent. Who are you? Minute by minute, we will deconstruct the social hypnosis they've been running, particularly over the last 150 years. Let us begin with something utterly concrete, something immediate, something all of us know and all of us feel. War. Any war. The camps do not matter here, nor the convictions each of us carries. What matters is the simple fact that at least 2 of the wars now burning across the world could, at any moment, separately or together, spill into a world war. Now let us bring that shadow, the shadow of world war, into the intimacy of our own lives. Only then can we understand what the Matrix truly is. Only then can we understand how the global socio-political hypnosis actually works. First, let us ask a question that, at first glance, may sound childish. Why does the possibility of being caught in a world war trouble us so deeply? The answer rises immediately, naturally, brutally, because we could die, and obviously, we do not want to die. But let us not stop there. Let us move from the childish question to one that sounds almost insane. Why exactly do we see a problem in dying in a world war? Again, the answer appears simple, instinctive, abrupt, because we would rather die in peace, preferably much later. Not in war. Not far too soon. And here, after a question that seemed absurd, we arrive at a crossroads of meanings. Because the third question is hidden inside the second one, and it is the key to everything. If we know with certainty that, sooner or later, we will die anyway, then why should it matter whether we die sooner or later, in peace or in war? This time, an intelligent human being can no longer answer so easily. Because here the road divides in 2. The first path. If all that we are is merely these bodies, if we did not exist before birth and will not exist once the body dies, then our lives possess absolutely no meaning whatsoever. From beginning to end, existence would be nothing but an accident. And in such a reality, it no longer matters at all whether we die sooner or later, whether in peace or in war. All discussions about war and its consequences, the price of oil or grain, diplomatic missions, military budgets, geopolitical strategies, all of it becomes profoundly ridiculous. A theater of seriousness floating above absolute meaninglessness. The second path. If we are not merely these bodies, if matter is not all that exists, if we are incarnated spirits who continue to exist, beyond the death of the body, within the spiritual world, then suddenly what we do with ourselves, and with this world, begins to matter. But what use is it that we and the world regain meaning through our spiritual nature, if we continue to approach every problem of life exactly as though we were nothing but bodies? At this moment on Earth, there are 3 kinds of human beings. The first kind. Those who believe they are not eternal, yet live as though they were. These are the materialists. They are genuinely convinced they are nothing but the outcome of a chance collision between a sperm cell and an ovum. And yet they devote themselves passionately to long-term plans, educational plans, career plans, financial plans, retirement plans. They speak solemnly of morality, civic activism, political ideologies, economic programs. They live as though they were eternal, while believing they are dust. The second kind. Those who believe they are eternal, yet live as though they were not. These are the spiritualists who have been so deeply hypnotized by society that, little by little, they begin to live exactly as though they were only these passing bodies, despite believing themselves to be eternal spirits. They approach the world materially. They approach war materially. They approach crisis materially. And yet their own belief should awaken within them the understanding that the true solutions for the world of bodies can only be found in the world of the spirits inhabiting those bodies. The third kind. Those who know themselves to be eternal spirits and who live accordingly. Not bodies pretending to be eternal. Not spirits who have forgotten themselves. But incarnated spirits who remember, every single day, what they truly are. And because they remember, they seek the solutions to the material world exactly where those solutions truly exist, within the spiritual world. And so, in the end, we stand at the threshold of world war for one simple reason. Most people relate to the very possibility of such a war either completely absurdly or completely wrongly. Absurdly, the materialists, who speak grandly about solutions while logically believing that war is merely the mutual destruction of accidental biochemical events. Wrongly, the spiritualists who believe in a reality beyond matter, yet continue searching for exclusively material solutions to profoundly spiritual crises. Correctly, only those who understand that because human beings are incarnated spirits, the causes and solutions of war alike are rooted first within the spiritual world and within the human spirit itself. There, in essence, is the matrix. There is the mechanism of social hypnosis. Once you understand the mechanism, you may use it to measure your own awakening. Do you live as a materialist pretending to be eternal? As a spiritual being living as though you were merely flesh? Or as an incarnated spirit consciously remembering itself, moment by moment, throughout the day? Because neither sleep nor awakening is permanent. Anyone may awaken from the matrix at any moment. And anyone may fall asleep within it again. Awakening is not a destination. It is a path. This is not a film about what is wrong with the world. You already know what is wrong. The wounds are visible on every screen, in every headline, in every conversation that dares to go below the surface. You do not need another inventory of catastrophe. You need something rarer, something almost never offered. The reason behind the catastrophe. The cause beneath the causes. The wound beneath the wound. That wound has a name. It is not greed, greed is a symptom. Not corruption, that is a consequence. Not even war, nor inequality, nor the algorithms, nor the leaders. The wound is this: the human being has been systematically separated from the knowledge of what they truly are. For generations, by design, through every institution we have built and every system we have inherited, the deepest truth about ourselves has been buried. And in the place of that truth, an illusion was installed, so total, so seamlessly woven into the fabric of daily life, that most of us have never once suspected it is there. But here is what the wound is for. There is a law, older than any civilization we have built and destroyed, that says, the caterpillar does not transform because conditions are favorable. It transforms because it has reached the edge. Because there is nowhere left to crawl. We have reached this edge. And the apocalypse, in its oldest sense, long buried beneath centuries of dread, doesn't signify only destruction. It also means revelation. The lifting of the veil. The moment the caterpillar opens its eyes and beholds, for the first time, that it was always something else. That moment is now. And it begins, as all real transformations do, not with a revolution, a leader, a program, or an election. It begins with a single human being who stops. Who breathes. Who remembers. This is the story of that remembering. We have all reached the crucial moment when the life we are living and the life we were meant to live look at each other across an abyss. Most of us look away. We go back to the noise. The notifications. The endless, urgent nothing that fills every second we do not guard. We tell ourselves, later. When things calm down. When the world stops. The world does not stop. I want to tell you something that no one on a screen, no one in a parliament, no one in a boardroom or a press conference will ever tell you. You are not what they made you believe you are. You are not a consumer. Not a voter. Not a demographic, a tax bracket, a productivity metric, or a data point. You are not the job title on your business card, nor the number in your bank account, nor the story others tell at dinner parties about who you are and what you have made of yourself. You are not even the sum of your memories, your failures, your diagnoses, your regrets, your ambitions, or your doubts. You are a butterfly who has spent their entire life being told they are a caterpillar. We are standing at the edge. Not just at the edge of a war or a recession or a political cycle. We are standing at the edge of ourselves. At the final frontier of a civilization that has forgotten what it is. Imagine a caterpillar. It has spent its entire existence crawling, following the leaf, following the branch, following the caterpillar in front of it. It does not question the crawling. It was told, from its first moment, that crawling is what caterpillars do. And then one day, at the edge of a branch, with nothing beneath it but the void, it is pushed. And at that very moment, something happens that the caterpillar could never have imagined from inside its crawling life. Wings. Now look at this planet from above at night. Light everywhere, the light of billions of human lives, burning. From this distance it is beautiful. It looks like stars fallen to earth. But come closer. Come all the way down into the light. And ask yourself, inside all of this brightness, how much darkness is there? Not just the darkness of evil, though that too. The other kind. The darkness of a person who does not know why they are alive. The darkness of a morning that feels like a sentence being served. The darkness of a life that is technically working, the salary, the apartment, the relationships, the social media presence, and yet feels, somewhere beneath all of it, like a case of mistaken identity. Like someone else is living your life in your place, and you are watching from a distance, unable to remember how to get back inside yourself. That darkness is not your personal failure. It is not your flaw, your chemistry, your particular issue. It is the most precise symptom of a civilization that made one catastrophic and systematic mistake and has been living with the consequences ever since. Picture a butterfly already flying above the abyss. A butterfly who until recently was exactly like the caterpillars still crawling below. It turns back and calls out to them. Why do you want so badly to escape the fall? And the caterpillars answer, can you not see we have reached the brink of the precipice? We want to save ourselves. And save our world. And the butterfly says, your life as a caterpillar has meaning only insofar as you fulfill your destiny. To become more than a caterpillar. And the caterpillars answer, as caterpillars always do. It is easy for you to talk, you have wings. And the butterfly answers, and this is the sentence that changes everything. Yes. But you can have wings too. And until recently, I was exactly like you. I was a caterpillar, until I realized I had been deceived by those who were pushing me toward the abyss as well, convincing me I could be nothing more than that. And the caterpillars say what many of us have said when the moment of truth arrives. We don't have time for this now. Even if what you say is true, we'll deal with it later. Right now, the only thing that matters is saving ourselves and our caterpillar world. There's no time for anything else. And the butterfly answers, and this is the answer that this film exists to deliver. That is precisely the problem. You have been conditioned to believe it is impractical even to think that you might be something other than caterpillars. That is why you ended up on the edge of the abyss. Not because there is anything wrong with you, but because you kept following your caterpillar leaders until they brought you, and themselves, to the brink of self-destruction. The caterpillar world cannot be saved as a caterpillar world. It can only be saved through its transformation into a world of butterflies. The caterpillar world is not an accident. It was built, piece by piece, beginning on the first day of school. A child arrives, newly come from the spiritual world into this one, still standing between the two. Children in their early years are not fully in the material world yet. They still hear what adults have long stopped hearing. They still see connections adults can no longer see. They still ask questions that make their teachers uncomfortable, not because the questions are wrong, but because they are right in a way the curriculum has no space for. And then, systematically, that connection is severed. For 15 years, the child is placed inside an educational process designed to produce one outcome above all others, a human being who believes they are only a body in a world of only matter. Every subject, every grade, every reward and punishment is oriented around this single invisible axis. You are biology. You are chemistry. You are a brain producing electrical signals that create the illusion of meaning in a universe that has none. Nothing more exists. Nothing more is possible. The name they give to what pupils study is itself a confession. Subject matter. Not subject spirit. Not subject being. Matter. The word is not accidental. It is embedded in the architecture of the program itself. All schools that teach the caterpillar how to become a successful caterpillar are institutions designed to prevent the caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. All workplaces that treat people as caterpillars and are treated as caterpillars in return are part of the same matrix. All entertainment designed to make the caterpillar feel that it is enough to be a caterpillar, that crawling is sufficient, that the leaf is enough, that this small life between birth and death is the whole of it, all of this is part of the same program. A program whose objective is simple: keep the caterpillar crawling. Because a caterpillar can be controlled, predicted, taxed, frightened, divided, and replaced. A butterfly cannot. After 15 years of school and a lifetime of entertainment, the cage is complete. And the most diabolical part? The prisoner cannot see the bars. Because the bars are not made of steel. They are made of assumptions so deep and so early they have been mistaken for reality itself. We live under a double dictatorship. And what makes it so devastatingly effective is that most of its subjects do not know it exists. The first dictatorship has a name we are familiar with: the materialist state. The educational system that teaches children they are only bodies. The political system that consults citizens every 4 years and makes every important decision without them. The economic system that turns human beings into resources, products, and consumers, stripping the sacred from every transaction and replacing it with a price. But there is a second face to this dictatorship, almost never examined, and it is the more insidious of the two. When the clerical dictatorship of the religious state was finally dismantled, when the church was separated from the apparatus of government, humanity was told it had been liberated. And it had been, from one form of tyranny. But what replaced it was not freedom. What replaced it was a different and subtler tyranny, the dictatorship of the secular state. The secular state, as it actually functions, not as it claims to function, means one thing above all others: the complete elimination of spirit and of the spiritual world from the official equation of human life. Not neutrality. Elimination. In a truly secular state, a person who speaks of their spirit in public is considered eccentric, unserious, or unstable. A person who speaks of cash flow is considered normal and useful. A person who introduces the spiritual dimension into a political discussion is laughed out of the room. A person who introduces the financial dimension is applauded for being pragmatic. This is not neutrality between the material and the spiritual. This is the imposition, as total as any clerical imposition in history, of a single metaphysical view, that there is no spiritual world, that the human being is only a body, and that any claim to the contrary is a private eccentricity that must not be allowed to enter the public domain. We escape the dictatorship of the religious state only to enter the dictatorship of the secular one. And the second is more perverse than the first, because the human being lives under the illusion of freedom. The cage has no visible bars. But the cage is total. There is only one form of genuine democracy, and it has never yet existed on this earth. It is what might be called spiritual democracy, a democracy that truly honors the free will of every human being. A democracy in which the atheist is not forced to live as a spiritual being, and in which the spiritual being is not forced to live as though they were only a body. A democracy in which neither materialism nor spirituality is imposed on anyone. A democracy in which the human being is free, actually free, not just theatrically, to live according to what they know themselves to be. What we have now is not democracy. It is the performance of democracy, in which the most important decisions, especially the decision of whether to go to war, are made by those who happen to occupy power at a particular moment, without consulting in any genuine way the people whose children will fight that war and whose taxes will pay for it. Think about what this actually means. When you hear the news that your country has decided to go to war, ask yourself, who decided? Was there a referendum? Were you consulted? Did you vote specifically on this? In virtually every case, no. Which means the statement America has decided to go to war does not mean the American people have decided to go to war. It means someone decided instead of the American people, and not in their name, that the American people are to go to war. This is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. And the moment enough people see it clearly, not as a political opinion but as a plain description of reality, the system's legitimacy dissolves. Not violently. Simply. Like a spell that only works on those who believe in it. The only thing that can truly unite the nations of the world, that can give international relations a foundation more durable than the shifting of competing interests, is a shared understanding of what the human being truly is. Remove that understanding, and you have only caterpillars negotiating about leaves. Restore it, and you have something the world has never yet seen, human beings meeting at the level of their common spiritual nature, where the reasons for war do not exist. Here is what they do not want you to understand. The people at the very top of the decision pyramid, those behind the curtain of every government, every central bank, every major international institution, do not believe for a single second that the spirit does not exist. At their most private gatherings, everything that is officially dismissed as mysticism, superstition, or conspiracy is precisely what fills the room. They work with spiritual realities. They are steeped in them. The materialism they spread is not a philosophy they believe. It is a weapon they wield. Because a human being who truly knows what they are, who lives from the center of their being rather than its periphery, cannot be manipulated. Cannot be divided. Cannot be marched to the edge of an abyss and persuaded it is for their own protection. Those who lead you toward materialism are not themselves materialists. They are some of the most devoted students of the spiritual world who have ever existed. Only devoted to its inversion, to using its laws against the very beings those laws were designed to liberate. They know your nature better than you do. And the entire design of the world we live in is constructed around one objective: making sure you never find that out. Let us speak plainly about the great adversary. The being whose project is the present state of the world, and whose greatest advantage is that most of the people he works through have no idea he exists. When someone does not believe you exist, when they have been trained since childhood to find the very concept of your existence laughable, you have enormous power over them. You can use their hands, their voices, their decisions, their spiritual forces, and they will believe they are acting freely from their own convictions. You can move billions of pieces on the board while none of them knows there is a board. This is not fiction. This is the most precisely engineered social program ever constructed, and it has been running, essentially uninterrupted, for 150 years. The great adversary does not need your consent for anything. He needs only two things: your ignorance of your own spiritual nature and your passivity. Give him those two things, and he does not need your active cooperation. Your unused spiritual forces flow automatically into his designs the moment you stop using them yourself. You become, without malice or intention, a co-creator of precisely the world you claim to oppose. Not because you chose it. Because you did not choose otherwise. This is why the most important front in the struggle for humanity is not political, not military, not economic. It is the inner front. The question of whether enough human beings become conscious of their own spiritual nature and reclaim their forces before the demonic program reaches completion. And the program is very close to completion. Look at the architecture of the world around you with unclouded eyes. Total surveillance. Permanent war. Educational systems that produce functional economic units rather than free spiritual beings. Media ecosystems that generate the precise emotional states, fear, outrage, helplessness, spectacle-seeking, that keep spiritual forces most effectively sedated and most easily redirected. None of this emerged by accident. It was built, piece by piece, by people who knew exactly what they were building, and why. There are at this moment two categories of world leaders. The larger is made up of people who genuinely have no idea what they're doing on this earth, who have never seriously asked what a human being is, or what the world is, beyond the accumulation of power. They are not evil. They are asleep. And precisely because they are asleep, their unused spiritual forces are placed at the disposal of beings whose objectives they would find horrifying if they could see them. The smaller category is those who know very well what they're doing, who have, at some point, made a conscious choice to align themselves with the program of the beings of darkness. Who have traded spiritual freedom for worldly power and believe they made a good bargain. But there is a third category, almost never discussed, and perhaps the most dangerous of all. These are the false guardians of the sacred, the so-called officials, who, in the name of protecting tradition, actually do the great adversary's work by preventing the very spiritual development he most fears. They do this not through materialism but through its mirror image. Through the teaching that spiritual knowledge is either already complete, nothing new can be revealed, everything worth knowing was given long ago, or that seeking to know the spiritual world through the intellect is hubris, is sin, is the enemy of faith. Both positions have the same effect. They keep the human being at the kindergarten level of spiritual development precisely when, according to the divine plan, the human being is ready for a university of the spirit. The greatest harm done to the human being is not even materialist ideology. It is the arrogant laziness of those who, posing as officials of the spiritual world, plant in us the idea that there is no need to know, that one must only believe, and believing means not asking. They prevent people from using the inner resources the spiritual world gives them precisely in order to know that spiritual world. And in doing so, they feed the great adversary's plan more efficiently than any atheist. Perhaps the hardest thing to understand, and yet the most necessary, is that materialism is not merely a philosophy. It is, in the most precise and literal sense, a vast spiritual operation. Materialism is induced, encouraged, and sustained by spiritual beings who oppose humanity's natural evolution. It is not an idea that arose spontaneously from human curiosity. It is a program designed, installed, and maintained by non-human intelligences who understand exactly what it does to the human being who receives it. This is the point at which many who consider themselves spiritualists become uncomfortable. And it is worth pausing here, because the discomfort itself is part of the program. You will have noticed a pattern in many spiritual writings and speeches. They speak of energies, of forces, of light, of fields, of vibrations. And they are not wrong, these things exist. But they speak of them as though they simply happen to be there. As though the light arrives from nowhere, and the energy circulates on its own, and the field maintains itself without an author. This is the comfortable version of spirituality. The version that costs nothing, demands nothing, and most importantly, names nothing. And what it most carefully avoids naming is the beings. The actual, specific, real spiritual beings, of both kinds, who generate these energies, who embody these forces, who are the light, and who are also its deliberate obstruction. When someone tells you to raise your vibration by connecting with pure spiritual energy, what they should actually be telling you is something far more specific and far more demanding, that if you free your mind, purify your feelings, and ennoble your will by putting your work in the service of your fellow human beings, then your spiritual energy acquires the concrete qualities that make it compatible with the similar spiritual energy of countless disembodied spiritual beings who are waiting, with urgency we can barely imagine, to work with you. The difference between these two statements is the difference between a tourism brochure and a map. One sounds appealing. The other tells you where you actually are, and what you actually need to do to get where you are going. Spiritual knowledge is what humanity lacks most today. There are many who feel the pain of their fellow human beings. Many who want to do something, or are already doing something, for them. But there are still extremely few who actually know specifically which spiritual beings are behind the current system, and which spiritual beings are alongside us in this great struggle. The great battle for humanity. The beings of darkness are not a metaphor. They are not a symbol for human greed or collective bad choices. They are real, specific, non-human intelligences, of ranks and orders as precise and hierarchical as anything in the visible world, who made, at a specific moment in spiritual history, a specific choice, to oppose the divine plan of human evolution, and to use the forces of that evolution for a counter-program of their own. Their primary characteristic, the thing that distinguishes their mode of operation from everything we are used to thinking about when we think about power, is that they are parasitic. They do not generate their own spiritual force. They cannot. That creative capacity belongs to the beings who remained aligned with the divine plan. What the beings of darkness possess instead is a precise knowledge of where human spiritual force is stored, how it flows, and under exactly what conditions it can be diverted from its intended purpose and redirected into theirs. The condition they require is simple: your ignorance of your own spiritual nature. That is all. They need nothing else from you. They do not need your consent, your cooperation, or your malice. They need only your unknowingness. The moment you do not know that you are a spiritual being, the moment you have been persuaded, by education and by media and by the general atmosphere of the age, that the word spirit refers to something abstract and probably imaginary, in that moment, the gate of your inner house stands open. And they enter. Not dramatically. Not with thunder. Quietly, practically, as a matter of course. And they help themselves to what is inside. This is not a figure of speech. It is the mechanism by which the world came to be in the state it is in today. Billions of human beings, most of them well-intentioned, most of them genuinely desiring a better world, going through their days with their spiritual forces flowing outward, unguarded, unclaimed. And a relatively small number of beings, and the even smaller number of human beings who consciously serve them, gathering those forces and using them for a purpose whose nature would horrify every single one of the humans whose energy it is built from. The gate through which these parasitic beings enter is ignorance. And the guard that closes that gate is spiritual science, not spiritual cliché, not spiritual comfort, not spiritual aesthetic, but the concrete, specific, rigorous knowledge of the spiritual world and its beings, laws, and operations. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free is not a poetic sentiment. It is a precise description of the only mechanism that actually works. Knowledge frees the spiritual forces that were being taken. Freedom becomes real. And the parasite finds an empty house. There is a false apex to the pyramid of planetary control. It is populated by politicians and oligarchs who are genuinely convinced that they govern, that they lead nations, that they make history. And in a narrow sense, they do, the way that a chess piece makes a move. But the hand that moves the piece is elsewhere. And most of the pieces have never once looked up to see the hand. These visible leaders are, in the most precise spiritual sense, sleepwalkers. They exercise power in a dream state. Their conviction that they govern the world is itself the most elaborate element of their sleep, a dream granted to them by the demonic spiritual beings who act through them, and through the occult organizations that serve as the transmission mechanism between those beings and the visible world. These occult organizations, the entirely secret societies that have shaped public life from behind the curtain for generations, are not a conspiracy theory. They are a spiritual fact. And their defining characteristic is this: their members possess genuine spiritual knowledge, real, specific working knowledge of the laws of the spiritual world, which they use systematically, deliberately, and with full awareness, against the human beings they keep in ignorance. This is the essential asymmetry of the present moment. Those who serve the beings of darkness are spiritually awake in their domain. They know what the human being is. They know the spiritual laws. They know the operations of imagination, inspiration, and intuition. They use these capacities every day, in the service of the program whose central aim is to prevent every other human being from discovering and using those same capacities. They are awake, and organized, and in complete agreement about their objective. While those who serve the light, the vast majority, are disorganized, divided, and in most cases not even fully aware that a battle is being fought, let alone that they are in it. Our world is literally governed by demons, not in a metaphorical sense, but in the precise spiritual sense of beings who use, without the knowledge or consent of the human beings through whom they work, the most powerful creative force in the known cosmos, the spiritual forces of the human being. This is the demonic dictatorship. And its greatest achievement is that it is invisible to almost everyone living under it. But the entire edifice has feet of clay. The only power the dark beings and their human servants actually possess is the power diverted from us. The moment enough human beings reclaim their own spiritual forces through knowledge, the moment the guard called spiritual science is placed at the door of the inner house, the pyramid loses its foundation. Not gradually. Immediately. Because a parasite without a host has nothing. And now, the good news. The other side of the equation. The side that the program of materialism most urgently requires you never to consider. In this hour of crossing, in these truly apocalyptic times, not only the beings of darkness are concentrating upon Earth and upon humanity. The beings of light are here too. In greater numbers, and of higher rank, than at any previous moment in human history. Because the stakes are higher than they have ever been. And the potential, if enough human beings awaken, is correspondingly vaster than anything that has previously been possible. The fundamental difference between the two kinds of beings, and this difference is everything, is this. The beings of darkness can exert their influence only when the human being is spiritually asleep. They work precisely in the absence of consciousness. They require your unknowingness. The beings of light can exert their influence only when the human being is spiritually awake. They work precisely in the presence of consciousness. They require your initiative. The beings of darkness do not abolish your free will directly, they distort the framework within which it expresses itself. They work continuously, invisibly, to keep you in spiritual sleep, so that your will is expressed in a diminished, misdirected, parasitically used form. The beings of light respect your free will absolutely, they will not impose themselves, they will not override, they will not help you without your asking. They help the human being awaken, and then they offer counsel, help, and knowledge, leaving complete freedom to accept or refuse. This means there is no rescue operation coming. Not because the higher beings do not care, they care, with an urgency and a love we can barely imagine. But because imposed rescue is not rescue. It is a different form of the same tyranny. An imposed good is always, at its root, a masked evil, because it negates the freedom without which the human being cannot become what the divine plan intends. The hierarchy of luminous beings, angels, who watch over individual human lives. Archangels, who work at the level of peoples and cultures. Archai, the spirits of time, who govern the great epochs of human development. And beings of yet higher rank, whose names and functions the spiritual traditions of humanity have preserved in fragmentary but not inaccurate forms, all of these beings are present. All of them are working. All of them are doing, within the law of human freedom, everything that can be done from their side of the threshold. And all of them are waiting, patient, urgent, luminous, for the human beings on earth to take the free initiative that opens the door from this side. The spiritual being who watches over your individual life, your guardian angel, in the oldest and most precise sense of that term, has accompanied you through every moment you have lived. They know your spiritual biography more completely than you know it yourself. They have watched you fall asleep day after day, and they have waited, each time, for the moment of waking. In this life, in this precise and unrepeatable historical moment, the stakes of that waking are higher than they have ever been before. And your angel knows it. And they wait. The moment you take the first free step, the moment you reach, consciously and intentionally, toward the spiritual world, your angel is there. Not eventually. Immediately. And the help that becomes available to you in that instant is of an order that no material force on earth can match, because it draws from a source that the beings of darkness have never had access to, the inexhaustible creative power of the divine cosmos, flowing freely through the fully conscious, fully free, fully loving human being. This is why the awakening of individual human beings, even one, even you, even now, is not a small thing. It is not a personal improvement project. It is an event in the spiritual world. It changes the balance of what is possible. It opens territory that was previously closed. It creates conditions in which the luminous beings can do what they have been preparing to do, and have been unable to do, not from lack of power, but from absolute respect for the freedom of the beings they love most. Us. The battle is real. The beings on both sides are real. The stakes, for the future of human evolution, for the karma of this generation, for what the spiritual world will look like on the other side of this threshold, are real. And the outcome depends, in the most literal possible sense, on the free choices of individual human beings. On whether enough of us, in time, claim what was always ours. There is no more important question on this earth right now than this one: Which beings are you, in your daily life, making it possible for? Which forces are you, through your choices, your awareness, your use or non-use of your own spiritual nature, feeding? The dark beings need only your sleep. The luminous ones need only your waking. And the difference between them, the entire outcome of the great battle for humanity, rests on that single threshold, open eyes or closed ones. Here is the fact that changes everything, and that almost no one has been told. Humanity crossed a threshold more than 100 years ago. A threshold as precise and as consequential as any threshold in the life of an individual human being, and as invisible, if you do not know where to look. That threshold is what can only be called the age of the spiritual adult. Consider what happens when an individual crosses the threshold of legal adulthood in any society. The day before their 18th birthday, they are a minor, protected by a different set of rules, held to a different standard of accountability, partially shielded from the full consequences of their choices by a framework that recognizes their incomplete development. The day after, everything changes. Not because the person has changed, the same body, the same mind, the same history, but because something in the order of things has shifted. From this moment, they are fully responsible for what they do and for what they fail to do, for their actions and for their inaction. The protection of childhood does not extend into adulthood. And if they expect it to, if they wait for someone to step in and take responsibility in their place, the way a parent once might have, they will wait for something that, within the new order of things, cannot come. This is precisely what happened to humanity, not as metaphor, but as spiritual fact, approximately 150 years ago. Humanity entered the epoch of inner development that enabled, for the first time in history, every human being, not just the initiated few, not just those born with particular gifts, but every human being, to access genuine spiritual knowledge. This was the threshold. The moment the entire human kingdom became capable of knowing itself as spirit was the moment the human kingdom became, in the laws of the spiritual cosmos, fully responsible for what it chose to do with that capacity. From that moment, the higher spiritual beings who had previously intervened, who had, across the centuries and the millennia, cushioned our falls, inspired our greatest teachers, kept the worst consequences of our worst choices within survivable limits, withdrew to the boundary of the threshold. Not from indifference. From absolute respect for the new law. Because the law of the spiritual cosmos is as exact and as non-negotiable as any law of physics, you cannot give the protection of childhood to an adult without destroying the very freedom that defines adulthood. An adult who is still managed like a child is not an adult. They are a prisoner who has been told they are free. 100 years have already passed since we became fully responsible for what happens to us. 100 years in which, for the most part, what the higher spiritual beings offered as higher knowledge was either rejected, ignored, or buried under the architecture of materialism that the beings of darkness were simultaneously constructing. Everything that has developed on Earth in the meantime, education, politics, economics, science, technology, international relations, has developed in the near total absence of spirit. And the result is the world we see today. This is why we are, for the first time in recorded history, standing at the edge of genuine self-destruction. Not because the higher beings have abandoned us, but because, until now, their interventions kept us from the full consequences of our choices, and now, as adults, we must face those consequences ourselves. The abyss we are approaching is not punishment. It is the logical result of 100 years of full responsibility exercised in the direction of spiritual sleep. But here is the other side of the same truth. The same passage into spiritual adulthood that made us fully responsible for our failures also made us, for the first time, fully capable of something no previous generation of human beings was ready for, the free, conscious, self-initiated spiritual work that opens the door to a quality of help from the higher beings that was never previously available. Think of what adulthood actually means for an individual. Not only increased responsibility, increased capacity. The adult can do things the child could not. Can enter into relationships of equality rather than dependence. Can initiate rather than only receive. Can ask, as a free being asking another free being, for help, and receive help that respects rather than diminishes their freedom. This is the quality of collaboration that becomes possible between the awakened human being and the luminous spiritual beings in the present epoch, and it is something qualitatively new in the history of the cosmos. It did not exist before humanity reached this threshold. And the higher beings know it. They experience it as an extraordinary opening, a possibility they have been preparing for across the entire span of human evolution. The great mystery, the great miracle of the spiritual world, is this: the only moment in which you are not left alone is the moment in which you begin to act alone. Without waiting for someone else to do your work for you. Without holding on for a savior, a leader, a teacher, a movement large enough that your joining it costs you nothing. The moment you take even the first genuine step, the moment you turn, freely and consciously, toward your own spiritual nature and toward the world that watches over it, you find that you were never alone. And that everything that was prepared, across centuries, precisely for this moment, becomes immediately available. The condition for receiving help from the luminous beings is now twofold and exact. First, the human being must become conscious of needing that help, which requires the knowledge of what they actually are, and of what is actually happening around them. And second, they must begin, themselves, to act. Not perfectly. Not comprehensively. Not with certainty about the outcome. Simply, begin. Humanity as a whole is now in the position of the young person who has just reached legal adulthood. Legally responsible, but not yet mature. The law has changed. The cosmic law has changed. Full responsibility is a fact, whether we know it or not. But maturity, the inner development that allows that responsibility to be exercised wisely, freely, and in full knowledge of what the world actually is something that must be worked for. Day by day. Person by person. Candle by candle. The gap between the legal adulthood we crossed 100 years ago and the spiritual maturity we have not yet achieved is the gap in which the disaster of the present moment lives. And closing that gap, not through institutions or programs or political change, but through the concrete, daily, free spiritual work of individual human beings who have chosen to grow up, is the only task that actually matters now. We are adults. We have been adults for more than a century. It is time, past time, to begin to act like it. To understand why this crisis is happening now, in this century, in these decades, in these very years, you need to understand something about the inner life of humanity that no history textbook has ever taught. Humanity does not develop only outwardly. It does not merely accumulate technology, territory, and institutions. It develops inwardly. Across the great epochs of human history, the inner faculties of the human being, the capacity for reasoning, for feeling, for spiritual perception, have undergone profound transformations. And these inner transformations are what drive the outer ones. The Industrial Revolution, for instance, did not create the human being of the Industrial Age. The human being of the Industrial Age created the Industrial Revolution because their inner development had reached the point at which it became possible. The same is true of every great outward transformation in history. The outer world is always, and only, a mirror of the inner one. We are not the products of our historical conditions. We are their authors. The inner transformation that has been unfolding over the last 150 years, accelerating, intensifying, entering its full maturity in our own time, is the emergence of the modern intellect, the human capacity for abstract thought, for analytical reasoning, for the kind of systematic, logical knowing that has produced modern science, modern technology, modern medicine. This is a genuine and magnificent inner development. It is precisely what was intended by the great plan of human evolution. But it came with a trap. Set deliberately, by beings who understood exactly what was about to happen to humanity, and who saw in it an opportunity, if they acted swiftly enough. The trap was this: convince the human being, at the very moment their intellectual faculties were flowering most magnificently, that those faculties were the only faculties. That the intellect was not a rung on a long ladder of knowing, but the ceiling of all possible knowledge. That what could not be measured, quantified, peer-reviewed, and replicated in a laboratory simply did not exist. And it worked. With devastating efficiency. Because naturally, as the intellect develops, as it proves itself capable of the most astonishing feats of analysis, the human being concentrates on it. Uses it. Is amazed by it. And if you tell that same human being, at the very moment of this concentration, that this instrument has one limitation, that it can tell you everything about matter but nothing about spirit, they will not seek to know the spirit through the intellect. And soon, they will not seek to know the spirit at all. This is intellectualism, not the use of the intellect, which is beautiful and necessary, but the reduction of all knowing to what the intellect alone can grasp. And from intellectualism, materialism follows as night follows day, because a being who believes they can only know the material world will soon believe there is nothing beyond it. And yet, and this is the door that was left open, the door that the great adversary could not quite close, the same intellectual development that was weaponized against the spiritual world also created, for the first time in history, the possibility of a genuine spiritual science. A spiritual science as rigorous, as systematic, as intellectually satisfying as any science of matter, but applied to the other half of reality. The half that has been waiting, patient and vast, for the human being to arrive at the point of readiness to receive it. We arrived at that point approximately 150 years ago. The door opened. And most of the world walked past it, because someone had convinced them that doors to the spiritual world were for superstitious children. And so the door remained open. And behind it, everything that could save us, everything that could explain us to ourselves, everything that the caterpillar would need to understand in order to become a butterfly. Still there. Still waiting. Still open. Technology is not the enemy. But alone, it is a creature with only one wing. It cannot fly, it spirals. We turned the intellect outward, toward matter, and reaped a staggering harvest. But we did not also turn it inward, toward spirit, and so we have no counterweight. We have one wing. The arrival of artificial intelligence makes this more urgent, not less. A humanity that does not know what it is, that cannot distinguish itself from the machine it has built, will not be able to resist the perfectly reasonable-sounding argument that, since the spirit does not exist, merging with artificial intelligence is simply the next step in human evolution. And the beings who designed the materialist program have been preparing this argument, and this moment, for a very long time. The answer is not to destroy the machine. The answer is to become fully human, so fully and consciously human that no machine, however sophisticated, however seamlessly integrated into the fabric of daily life, can be confused with the free spiritual being that operates it. Technology follows the human being. The human being does not follow technology. That is the principle. And restoring it is one of the central tasks of the transformation now beginning. Every night, without exception, without our asking for it or even understanding it, we leave this world. We call it sleep. We think of it as the body's maintenance period, the brain's filing system, the mind's nightly reset. And in a narrow material sense, all of that is true. But it is not the whole truth. It is not even the most important truth. Every night, the spirit separates from the body and returns, for the hours of sleep, to the spiritual world from which it came. Not to darkness. Not to unconsciousness. To the world that is as real as the one we leave behind. The world where the higher beings who watch over us work with us, preparing us for the next day. The world where the consequences of our spiritual choices begin to take shape as impulses that will return to the waking world with us in the morning. This is why the quality of what you carry into sleep matters enormously. The person who falls asleep in the grip of fear, rage, or despair carries those states into the spiritual world and returns from it diminished. The person who falls asleep in the grip of the materialist conviction that nothing exists beyond the body, who has spent the day treating themselves and everyone around them as matter rather than spirit, carries that conviction into the spiritual world. And the spiritual world, which is not symbolic but as real and specific and populated as any world we know, receives that person accordingly. And the person who falls asleep with a conscious act of imagination, reaching toward the spiritual world intentionally, with gratitude and purpose, forming in their mind a bridge toward their awakened peers, toward the higher beings who watch over them, carries that intention into the higher realms and returns from sleep changed. Not always in ways they can immediately name, but changed. With something added that was not there before. With a capacity slightly expanded, a connection slightly deepened, a direction slightly clearer than it was the night before. Every great spiritual tradition that has ever existed has included some form of evening preparation. Every initiated teacher across every tradition has pointed to the threshold of sleep as one of the most spiritually significant moments of the human day. Not as ritual for its own sake, but because they knew what modern materialism does not know: sleep is not the interruption of consciousness but its continuation in a different and deeper register. A human being who has lived their entire life as though they were only a body, who has never consciously reached toward the spiritual world, never acknowledged their own spiritual forces, never intentionally used the hours of sleep as what they actually are, carries that material conviction into death itself. And death, for such a being, is not the liberation into the spiritual world that it should be. It is a kind of anchoring, a remaining in the near-earth spiritual sphere rather than rising through it. Not punishment. Not failure. The simple consequence of a lifetime spent refusing, or never being offered, the knowledge of what lay beyond the body's horizon. Around the earth, as a result of a century of accelerated and total materialism, there is now a layer of spirits who have died but have not fully risen, who remain caught in the near-earth spiritual sphere, unable to release themselves from the gravity of a material world they lived as though it were all there was. This layer is a spiritual reality with consequences for the living. It impedes the transmission of impulses from the higher spiritual beings who watch over us, making it harder for those impulses to reach the human beings on earth who most need them. The human being did not begin at birth. Will not end at death. The life we are living is but one fragment of a long story, a story whose arc is the gradual development of the free spiritual being who is the ultimate destination of human evolution. The mistakes of today become the lessons of tomorrow. The capacities developed through genuine spiritual effort transform into gifts. Judgment is not punishment. It is the universe's commitment to consistency, the law that nothing is lost, nothing goes unaccounted for, nothing we do or fail to do disappears into the void. This longer view does not diminish the urgency of the present moment. It intensifies it. Because what is chosen now, freely, in full consciousness of what is at stake, carries a weight proportional to the stakes. The karma of a generation that chose to awaken at the edge of the abyss is the karma of a generation that changed the direction of human evolution itself. And the karma of a generation that chose to sleep, when waking was possible, and when everything depended on it, is something none of us who have understood this should be willing to inherit. We are not alone in this. The beings who watch over us see clearly what is at stake. They wait, with an urgency we can barely imagine, outside the door of the human spiritual adulthood that we have fully entered. They cannot come in without invitation. They will not break the law of free will. But the moment we open the door, the moment we take the first steps of genuine initiative, they are there. And the help they can give, once freely invited, is of an order that changes everything. The human being is a specific kind of being. Not merely intelligent, there are other intelligent beings in the cosmos. Not merely loving, other beings also love. The human being is the being whose destiny it is to unite, within a single individual life, the three great principles of the cosmos: freedom, knowledge, and love. Not one, not two, all three, simultaneously, woven so completely together that they become a single thing, the free human being who knows the world in love, and loves it through knowledge, and is free precisely because they know and love. These three are not separate commandments. They are a single living reality, and the human being is its home. Freedom without knowledge is randomness, a will without direction, a fire without light. Knowledge without love becomes power, which becomes tyranny, the most sophisticated and therefore the most dangerous tyranny, because it uses the truth as its instrument of domination. And love without freedom is not love at all, it is dependency, possession, or the beautiful performance of love from a being who has never chosen it. Look at where we are with each of these three. Freedom, on earth today, means the right to choose between options designed by someone else, within a framework built to make certain choices seem natural and others impossible. This is not freedom, it is only the theater of freedom. Knowledge, on earth today, means the official version of events delivered through channels owned by the interests that benefit from particular versions being believed. And love, do we even need to describe what love looks like on earth today? Tens of thousands of children killed by bombs while we watch. Hundreds of millions going to sleep hungry on a planet with enough food for everyone. This is where we are. Not because the human being is broken. Because the human being has been kept from themselves. Returned to themselves, to the full life of freedom, knowledge, and love, they are capable of something the world has never seen. Love. The third element. The one hardest to speak about without reducing it to something smaller than it is. True love, the love that constitutes the third principle of the human being, is not a feeling. Not an emotion that comes and goes with circumstances. Not the warmth you feel for people you know. It is something far more demanding, far more physical in its effects, and far more costly in what it requires of you. To open yourself to real love is to feel, not only in your thoughts and emotions, but in the cells of your physical body, the suffering of your fellow human beings. Not in the abstract. Concretely. Behind every news story about children killed by bombs, there is a pain. And when you truly open yourself to love, that pain becomes your pain. It fills you. It is like a leaden hand pressing you down into the earth. And then comes the hardest part. Because you could, at that moment, close again. You could retreat to the safety of distance, to the comfortable compassion that costs nothing and changes nothing. Most people do. It is not weakness. It is the survival reflex of a being who has been given more pain than they know how to carry. But to close is to fail love. And to fail love is to fail the third great principle of what we are. The choice, and it requires the greatest act of will available to a human being, is to remain open. To hold the pain of the world inside you without collapsing under its weight. To feel it fully, without refusing it, without escaping it, and then, through an almost supernatural act of inner strength, to transmute it. To let it pass through you and come out the other side not as despair or rage or helplessness, but as action. As something concrete done for the ones who are suffering. As a candle lit because the darkness of someone else's night has become, through the open channel of genuine love, the darkness of your own. Every conflict, from a domestic argument to a world war, has one and only one real cause. The people in conflict are living at the periphery of their being rather than the center. This is not a metaphor. It is the mechanics of conflict, applied with equal precision at every scale. When two people quarrel, the actual reason is never the apparent one, the topic over which they fight. The actual reason two people quarrel, on any topic, is that neither of them is centered. Neither lives in their own spirit, conscious of themselves. And if even one of the two managed, in the midst of conflict, to remember their own center, their own spirit, the conflict would be extinguished instantly. Not because it was reasoned away. Because the conflict cannot exist in the spiritual center. It belongs entirely to the periphery. Wars between nations are this same dynamic, scaled. States led by people living at the periphery, whatever they claim about themselves spiritually, however religious they insist they are, will always find reasons to fight. Because the struggle for territory and resources belongs strictly to the periphery. It belongs to the 100% material sphere. The spiritual center has no interest in territory. The spiritual center of a human being, or of a nation, has no enemy. Peace cannot be obtained in any way. This is what we most need to understand. Peace is simply the natural state that accompanies, as a result, the positioning in the center, in spirit, of the peoples of the world. You cannot negotiate it. You cannot impose it. You can only create the conditions in which it arises of itself. And those conditions are spiritual, not material. The entire entertainment industry, in its current form, at its current scale, with its current function in daily human life, is part of the caterpillar program. Because the function it serves is clear, to keep the caterpillar comfortable as a caterpillar. To fill the hours that might otherwise be spent in genuine inner development with something stimulating enough to prevent boredom but shallow enough to produce nothing. To give the caterpillar the sensation of experience without any actual transformation. The volumes are overwhelming. The average person, across their lifetime, will spend much more time being entertained than they will spend concentrating on what truly matters. Much more time than anything else. And almost none of that time will bring them even a centimeter closer to the knowledge of what they are. But there is another kind of art. And the distance between the two is not a matter of quality, or budget, or fame, or critical acclaim. It is a matter of function, of intention, of what happens to the person who receives it. True art, in whatever medium, however technically simple or elaborate, however commercially successful or completely invisible, does one thing above all others: it reminds the caterpillar that it was meant to become a butterfly. It creates, in the person who encounters it, an experience of their own depth that they could not have created alone. It opens a door, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, to the inner life that the program of materialism has been trying to close since the first day of school. It produces what the Greeks called catharsis, not entertainment, but transformation. Not pleasure, but recognition. The recognition of something within you that you knew was there and had almost convinced yourself was not. Every genuine work of art is an act of spiritual resistance. Every film, every book, every piece of music, every painting, every poem that reminds a human being of their own depth is a candle lit in the program's darkness. And this is why the arts have been so systematically commodified, so relentlessly transformed from a practice of spiritual service into a product for economic exchange, because the beings who designed the program understood, better than most artists do, what true art actually is, and what it can do. This documentary, if it is doing what it intends to do, is an act of true art. Not because of its production values or its cinematic craft, but because its function is to remind you of what you are. To be the butterfly calling to the caterpillar from above the abyss. You had wings all along. There is a trap that awaits every person who begins to awaken, a trap more comfortable than almost any other, and therefore more dangerous. It is the trap of the ivory tower. The trap of the person who has genuinely tasted the spiritual center, who has experienced, if only in a flash, the reality of their own spirit, and who, instead of continuing the difficult work of remaining in that center while fully engaged with the peripheral world, retreats. Who builds, at the periphery, a replica of the center. A walled space where they are never in conflict, never inconvenienced, never tested, and who mistakes this comfort for spiritual achievement. You will recognize this kind of person. They appear never to enter any conflict. They speak beautifully about peace and unity. They have all the right vocabulary of spiritual development. But look more closely, and you will see, they have not achieved non-conflict. They have achieved the avoidance of anything that could become conflictual. They have built, in the periphery, an emperor's court, and they sit in it, surrounded by those who confirm their elevation, never stepping down into the mud where the actual work is. And whoever values their status as a spiritually elevated being more than the willingness to descend into the mud for the sake of those who are still in it, is not, in fact, spiritually elevated. They are merely a more refined version of the egoism they believe they have transcended. The true way is not for self-sufficient emperors of the spirit who never step down from the elevation their followers carry them on. The true way is for those who are not afraid to descend, to get dirty, to be in the world as it actually is, among the people as they actually are, while striving, imperfectly, with falls and recoveries, to remain connected to the center even in the mud of the periphery. Do not fear the peripheral mire, you who have known the center. Because there, in the mire, are billions of potential lotus flowers, potential human beings who, in order to recognize their own nature, need precisely the example of someone who, though having known the center, does not shrink from stepping back into the muck. For the lotus flower that rises from the mud does not leave the mud behind. It returns to it, so that other lotus flowers may also rise. Remaining anchored in the center of one's own spirit is never a definitive achievement. It is always work, labor, effort. A person who has known many moments of genuine centering can still fall into conflicts, can still slide back to the periphery, if they forget or neglect the daily inner work. This is not failure, this is the nature of the path. And it is 1,000 times better to fall and rise and learn something new from every fall than to tape yourself to a comfortable armchair and congratulate yourself that you have avoided all falling. The world needs lotus flowers that grow from the mud, not lotus flowers that grow from sterile water and are surprised that the mud exists. The world needs spiritually awakened people who are willing to stand, fully present, in the mess of the peripheral world, because that is where the billions of caterpillars are. And the caterpillars cannot be reached from the ivory tower. They can only be reached from the mud, by a fellow mud dweller who has somehow, impossibly, not stopped being a lotus flower. You decided to become involved the moment you realized that all so-called international negotiations, which, at best, produce only longer or shorter pauses between wars, as history so clearly proves, are conducted by people who never once addressed the despiritualization of the world as the primary cause of global catastrophe. At first it was little more than an impulse. A fleeting idea, a distant voice, almost inaudible beneath the terror of everyday noise. It was not even the first time you had heard that distant calling. Somehow, throughout your entire life, you had sensed that something greater was meant to come, that you were not here merely to be part of a society stripped of all spiritual substance. And yet, even having devoted much of your life to your own inner development, the frustration of seeing yourself, day after day, as part of a world sliding toward the abyss clung to you like a shadow. You were one of those who intuited, or even consciously knew, that more was required. That something else was needed, that every small action taken by each awakened individual mattered, but that these actions somehow had to be gathered into a whole, like pieces of a puzzle. For all the pieces existed, yet the puzzle itself could not be seen. A world in which so many are doing something, and yet in which, paradoxically, most feel utterly alone in their efforts. You waited, throughout your life up to that point, for that something greater. You hoped, and perhaps even believed, that one or more leaders would appear, capable of gathering people like you from across the entire earth. But that, too, did not happen. And frustration continued to grow. Until one day, you realized you had been waiting in vain for leaders. Not because leaders could not still appear, but because the age of leaders had passed. In a flash of understanding, you grasped that we had all entered the stage of development specific to the spiritual adult. That no one could intervene in our place any longer. That the only true leaders of the present and the future, from now on and forever, are those who, having become leaders of their own lives, tell others that it is time for them to become leaders of their own. The moment you understood all this, you stopped waiting for a favorable context and began to create it yourself. My voice alone is too weak. Your voice alone is hard to hear even in your immediate neighborhood. But our voice, spoken together, across every country, every tradition, every language, at the same moment, will be so powerful that it will be heard throughout the world. Because here is what changes everything. Those beside us will finally begin to listen when they no longer hear only us as background noise, easily filtered, but everyone. From south and north, east and west, from every corner of the world, the same truth expressed in 1,000 different forms: we are spirits, not only bodies. There is a spiritual world, not only a material one. And our entire society must be rebuilt from the foundation so that we can live our lives as embodied spirits, not as accidental bodies passing briefly through a world that has no idea we are here. This song does not require that we all hold the same creed or the same spiritual convictions. We remain diverse and free. And that diversity is not a weakness, it is the most eloquent proof of the extraordinary richness of the spiritual world itself. Can anyone who feels the art in a Rembrandt painting claim that, feeling it, prevents them from feeling the same art in a Raphael? Then neither can anyone who has touched the spirit through one tradition claim that this prevents others from touching it through another. The founders of the great religions are not at war with one another. Only their followers fight, manipulated by those who need the division. The moment the awakened, across every tradition and conviction, recognize their common ground, the demonic advantage of division dissolves. And what was organized darkness faces, for the first time, organized light. Here is something the book of Materialism will never tell you, because it cannot. Because the moment it did, the entire program would unravel. Most human beings are not truly inside their own bodies. Not as a metaphor, not as a poetic figure, but as a plain description of what is actually happening, right now, in this city, on this street, behind these faces. The spirit, chased from its earliest years out of conscious self-awareness by a system designed to make it forget itself, no longer fully inhabits the physical form it was born into. The body moves through the world. It performs its functions. It goes to the job, sends the messages, attends the meetings, feeds itself, scrolls through the screen, sleeps, wakes, and begins again. But the deep human being, the spirit that was meant to be at the wheel, is only partially there. In many cases, barely there at all. Like self-driving cars with no human at the wheel, our bodies, by the billions, drive themselves. Not steered by the profound human being within, but by the substitute that the materialist system has installed in its place, the accumulation of conditioned responses, programmed desires, manufactured fears, and borrowed convictions that passes for a self in a world that has forgotten what a self actually is. This is why the world looks the way it looks. Not because human beings are evil. Because the beings who were meant to live in these bodies, the real owners of these magnificent physical instruments, have been evicted. Or more precisely, have been talked out of the knowledge that the house is theirs. And in the vacancy left by the departed owner, others have moved in. Parasitic beings, as the book on which this documentary is based upon describes them, feeding on the unused spiritual forces of billions of partially inhabited human lives. Crowds everywhere, people nowhere. Not in an abstract moral sense. In a completely concrete one. What we need, more urgently than any political program or technological solution, is for people to return to Earth. For the deep human being to take full possession of its body and begin its life here, because this Earth exists to be inhabited by real humans. Not by the substitute society manufactures. And here is the proof that every single person watching this film already carries inside them, whether they know it or not. You have had moments when the ordinary texture of daily life suddenly opened, in nature, in music, in a piece of writing, in a sacred place, in the presence of genuine love, in a flash of insight so clear it felt like waking from a dream you had been living for years. Moments when you felt, unmistakably, completely, without any doubt at all, more fuller, more present, more yourself than in any ordinary hour of any ordinary day. Those moments are not accidents. They are not neurological flukes or the effect of a good meal or a favorable circumstance. They are the moments when the deep human being actually inhabits its body. The only moment when the spirit is fully in the physical form that carries it. The only moments of genuine life, as opposed to the simulation of life that materialism has been producing, at industrial scale, for 150 years. Compare those moments to the texture of ordinary life, the life lived at the surface of yourself, managed by the substitute self, moving through the days without truly touching them, and you already know everything this film is trying to tell you. You have already felt the difference between being in your body and merely occupying it. Between being alive and merely continuing. That difference, that distance between the two, is the precise measurement of how much the system has taken from you. And reclaiming it is not a spiritual luxury. It is the most practical and urgent act available to you. Because a human being fully in their body, fully conscious of their spirit, fully present in their own life, is a human being from whom the parasitic forces have nothing to take. The house is occupied. The owner is home. And the uninvited guests have no choice but to leave. The question that follows every honest confrontation with the state of the world, the question that arrives in the dark, after the news, after the statistics, after another image of another child in another place we were told was being protected, is the oldest and the hardest. Why does God allow this? It is a question that has destroyed faith in millions of people who could not find an answer that satisfied both their intelligence and their love. The conventional answers, it is a mystery, it tests us, it builds character, it will be compensated in the afterlife, have all, in one way or another, failed to reach the place where the question actually lives. So let us try a different answer. The real one. If evil did not exist, if there were no possibility of choosing darkness, cruelty, destruction, indifference, then good would not be a choice. It would be a mechanism. A reflex. The output of a system with no alternative input. And a good that is not chosen is not good, it is compulsion. It is the good of a machine that can produce nothing else. The divine plan, as the book How Did You Save the World Next Month describes it, has at its center one objective above all others, the production of genuinely free beings. Beings who choose good not because they cannot do otherwise, but because, having fully seen the alternative, they freely, consciously, and with complete understanding of what they are doing, choose it. This quality of good, freely chosen, in full knowledge of its opposite, is something that could not exist in a cosmos without evil. It is, in the most precise possible sense, the point. Evil is not an error in the divine architecture. It is a structural necessity of a cosmos designed to produce free beings. The choice between good and evil is the only real choice. Everything else, which job to take, which city to live in, which political party to support, is peripheral. The choice between sleeping and waking, between giving your spiritual forces to the light or letting them be taken by the dark, between being a human being or being the substitute for one, this is the choice. The one that matters. The one that the entire architecture of human history was constructed to make possible. In these times, precisely these times, at this edge, in this apocalyptic moment, the stakes of that choice are higher than they have ever been. And the weight of a freely chosen good, made now, with full knowledge of what is being chosen and what is being refused, is cosmically greater than any good produced in any less decisive moment. This is not consolation. This is the reason the moment matters as much as it does. Evil cannot be eliminated. It can only be displaced by the free and conscious choice of enough human beings to produce the one thing the beings of darkness cannot generate themselves and cannot steal from a fully conscious human being, genuine, freely chosen, fully knowing love. That is the only force in the cosmos that evil has no answer to. Not because it is sentimental or naive, but because it is the one thing that, by its nature, requires freedom to exist. And freedom, fully exercised, is the one condition under which the dark beings lose their power entirely. One question, simple, almost childish. But hidden inside it is the key to the entire political landscape of the modern world. Is God left wing or right wing? The answer: God is neither. The devil is both. God created only human beings. The devil divided them into left and right. This is not a joke. It is not a rhetorical flourish, it is a precise description of the function that the left-right political division actually serves, a function that has nothing to do with representing different values or different visions of the good society, and everything to do with keeping people permanently occupied in a conflict that benefits no one except the beings who created it. Think about what the left-right division actually produces in practice. It produces two groups of people who are, in their vast majority, well-intentioned human beings who genuinely want a better world, who share far more with each other than they are permitted to notice, locked in a permanent state of mutual contempt, suspicion, and conflict. Each side convinced the other is the enemy. Each side spending the enormous creative energy of its outrage on the other side rather than on the actual source of the problems they both experience. Each side manipulated, by those who benefit from the division, into believing that the solution is political victory over the other camp. While the world is destroyed for both sides simultaneously by the very forces that created both sides and both camps and every flag and every slogan that keeps them apart. The secret organizations that actually direct the planetary program do not care about left or right. They do not have a preference for one ideology over another. Their only requirement is the permanence of the conflict, because as long as people are busy fighting each other about left and right, they have no time and no energy to find the deep human being within themselves. The one who is not in conflict with anyone. The one for whom the entire left-right division is as meaningless as arguing about the color of the chain while remaining a prisoner. The truly awakened person does not ask of another human being, "Are you left or right?" They ask, "Are you awake or asleep? Are you in your body or absent from it? Are you using your spiritual forces yourself, or has the system persuaded you they do not exist?" These are the only questions that matter. And across every answer to these questions, across every ideology, every religion, every culture, every language, the awakened recognize each other. Not because they are the same. Because they are, for the first time, actually present. Politicians will never change the world for the better. A world changed for the better will produce the corresponding politicians. This is not pessimism, it is the precise reversal of the lie we have been told. Change does not flow from the top of the pyramid to the base. It never has. It flows from the awakened base to a summit that has no choice, eventually, but to reflect it. The question is only whether enough of the base awakens before the summit completes what it is building. There is a land. The oldest contested land on Earth. A land so charged with spiritual significance across so many thousands of years that the very soil beneath it vibrates at a frequency no geologist can measure. A land where, 2,000 years ago, the single most important spiritual event in the history of the human kingdom took place, the event that every genuine spiritual tradition, in one form or another, has been processing ever since. The event that split time itself into before and after. In that land, right now, in our time, something is happening that the news describes in the language of politics and geopolitics and military strategy. And all of that description, however accurate in its own register, misses what is actually happening entirely. Because what is actually happening is not political. It is spiritual. And it is of the first magnitude. Precisely at this period, in this most charged of all places on Earth, on the very ground where the greatest spiritual turning point in human history unfolded, an operation of black mass death is being carried out. Tens of thousands of human beings killed. Tens of thousands of children. With a satisfaction that was not hidden but displayed. Self-documented, in hundreds of recorded sequences, by many of those carrying it out, their own faces lit with something that no honest observer can describe as anything other than joy at the generation of death. From every serious standpoint of genuine spiritual knowledge, what is unfolding in this ancient land is the broadest, the most deliberately positioned, and the most spiritually significant operation of inverted sacred power that has ever been carried out on this earth. Consider its elements with clear eyes, the killing of civilians on a massive scale. The massive killing of children above all others, for the child is the image of purity and of the future, and to kill the child is to kill the future. The association of that killing with documented, self-recorded demonic satisfaction, which is precisely the central gesture of the inversion of the divine, the substitution of the creation of life with the creation of death, performed not in anguish but in celebration. And all of this concentrated, with a precision that cannot be accidental, in the exact location, and at the exact temporal distance of 2,000 years, from the event that constitutes the greatest threshold in the spiritual history of our species. And now the deepest layer of the parable. 2,000 years after that threshold event, something that was announced, that was awaited, that was prepared across the entire subsequent history of human spiritual development, is now occurring, the return of the greatest spiritual being who ever walked this earth, not in physical form but in the etheric spiritual world, perceptible to any human being who has developed the necessary inner organs of perception. This spiritual manifestation is not a future promise. It is a present reality. And precisely at the moment of this most intimate and most decisive spiritual manifestation, in the very place where it began, on the very ground it consecrated, the great adversary throws his countervail. His deliberate darkening of the precise spot, through which the greatest light is returning. As he did in another form, at the previous wave of this same return, when the horrors of the mid-20th century cast their shadow over the first manifestations of this same presence. The current situation is this. The most ancient land on Earth is being used, at this exact moment in history, as the stage for the most deliberate act of spiritual counter-creation ever attempted. It is so precisely because of what is returning through it. And precisely because the great adversary knows that if enough human beings recognize what is happening, his countervail fails. This, in its deepest sense, is the test of humanity right now. Not a political test. Not a geopolitical test. the test of whether enough human beings have awakened sufficiently to see, beyond the political language, beyond the carefully managed narrative, beyond the noise designed to prevent exactly this seeing, what is really happening. And to refuse, from the level of the deep human being, to pretend they have not seen it. There is a misunderstanding at the heart of much of what calls itself spiritual, a misunderstanding that the book How Did You Save the World Next Month corrects with precision, and that the documentary cannot leave unaddressed. The material world is not an illusion. Matter is not the enemy of spirit. The physical body is not a prison from which the soul longs to escape. And the purpose of spiritual awakening is not to refuse the material world, to deny it, leave it behind, achieve a distance from it that feels like freedom. The material world is real. But it is, as the book and this documentary states, a reality of the spiritual world, generated by it, sustained by it, populated by a hierarchy of spiritual beings whose creative activity is what we perceive, at the surface, as physical matter. The illusion is not matter. The illusion is materialism, the belief that matter is all there is. That it generated itself, that it has no source, no author, no spiritual interior. And this distinction matters enormously. Because the purpose of the human being on earth, the actual purpose, the one the divine plan was designed around, is not to escape matter but to re-spiritualize it. To bring spirit back into the material world. To inhabit this physical creation so fully, so consciously, so lovingly that the spirit it was made from becomes perceptible again, in the way we build, in the way we organize our societies, in the way we treat the soil and the water and the bodies and the children. In the way we make art, and educate, and govern, and trade, and speak to each other across the lines of difference. This is why we are here. Not to pass through the world untouched by it. Not to achieve a purity that requires distance from the mess of actual life. But to descend, fully, into the material world, and to transform it from the inside, through the only force that can actually do so, the fully conscious, fully free, fully loving human spirit that knows what it is and why it came. And this is why the destruction of the material world is not merely a geopolitical crisis. It is a spiritual crisis of the first order. It is what happens when the beings whose task it was to re-spiritualize matter forget their task entirely, and begin, instead, to consume the very world they were meant to consecrate. If we do not remember that we are here as spirits whose task is to re-spiritualize matter, we will shatter matter itself. For that is the purpose of its existence, not to be exploited but to be transfigured. In the process of re-spiritualizing matter, we advance in the spiritual development of our human kingdom. This is the key, the only key. And it is the key that the entire apparatus of modern materialism was built to make us forget. This is perhaps the statement that requires the most careful hearing, because it sounds, at first, like encouragement. Like the kind of thing that is said to make people feel better about their small individual lives. It is not. It is a precise description of a spiritual law whose consequences, when understood, change everything about how the individual relates to the collective crisis. A person who liberates themselves through spiritual knowledge is a savior of the world. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, concretely, mechanically, as a matter of spiritual physics. Here is why. Every human being carries, whether they know it or not, a reservoir of spiritual forces, the same forces that, in a fully conscious and freely acting human being, produce imagination, inspiration, intuition, love, and genuine freedom. These forces are real. They are the most potent creative energy in the known cosmos. And they cannot be neutral, they cannot sit idle, they are fluid, they flow. And the direction of their flow is determined by one thing only, whether or not the human being who carries them is conscious of them. If you are conscious of your spiritual forces and use them yourself, toward knowledge, toward love, toward the free service of your fellow human beings, they flow in the direction of the divine plan. They contribute to the re-spiritualization of the world. They are added to the side of the light. If you are not conscious of them, if the system has persuaded you they do not exist, or has kept you so busy and so distracted that you never reach the level of yourself where they live, they flow in the other direction. Parasitic beings take them. And the force that was meant to help build a world fit for free human beings is used, instead, to dismantle it. This means that every individual act of genuine awakening withdraws real spiritual force from the demonic program. Not symbolically, actually. The moment you become conscious of your own spirit and begin to live from it, the amount of spiritual energy available to the beings of darkness decreases by exactly the amount that you have reclaimed. You become, in the most literal possible sense, one less source of fuel for the fire that is consuming the world. Demonic beings cannot harm us unless, out of ignorance, we surrender our own inner resources to them. Seen from this perspective, the destruction of the world is nothing but a collective suicide carried out with the instrument of ignorance. And its reversal, the salvation of the world, is nothing but a collective awakening carried out with the instrument of knowledge. One person at a time, one reclaimed life at a time, one spiritual force withdrawn from darkness and returned to light at a time. This is how the world is saved. Your liberation is not a private matter, it is a public act with consequences in the spiritual world that extend far beyond the boundaries of your individual life. The person who wakes up does not only save themselves. They change the balance of what is possible for everyone. They make the next awakening slightly easier, the critical mass slightly closer, the tipping point slightly nearer. They take back, from the forces that were using it against the world, the precise amount of creative spiritual force that was yours, and return it to its intended purpose. This is why there is no exaggeration in the statement, a person who liberates themselves is a savior of the world. There is no inflation in it. There is only the exact truth of a law that has been operating, unseen and unnamed, through every moment of human history, and that is operating right now, in your life, whether you are conscious of it or not. You already know all of this. Not as ideas, not as propositions to be evaluated. You know it the way you know the moments when you have been most alive, which is to say, you know it in your spirit, in the place that the system could never fully reach, in the part of you that never completely forgot what it is. You have had those moments. Standing in nature, and something opened that has no name in the language of the material world. Listening to music, and feeling something move through you that was larger than the music and larger than you, and for a few seconds you knew, without argument, without proof, without needing any external confirmation. I am more than this. There is more than this. Reading a sentence and having to stop, because the sentence found something in you that you did not know was still there, waiting to be found. Sitting beside someone you love in silence, and feeling the silence as fullness rather than absence. Waking at 4 in the morning to a darkness that for once was not frightening but somehow intimate, as if the spiritual world, in the absence of daily noise, had come close enough to touch. These moments are not accidents. They are not the reward of good chemistry or favorable circumstance. They are the moments when the deep human being, the real one, the spirit, the driver, is fully in its body. The only moments in which you are genuinely in your own life rather than moving through a simulation of it. The only moments of actual aliveness, as distinct from the maintenance of biological continuity that passes for life in the caterpillar world. Compared to those moments, the ordinary texture of daily life, managed by the substitute self, driven by conditioned responses, nourished by the entertainments of a system that needs you distracted, is not life. It is a facsimile of life. A very convincing, very comfortable, very efficiently maintained facsimile. But not the real thing. And some part of you has always known the difference. Has always been able to feel the difference. has always been the part that the system could not quite reach, no matter how complete the curriculum, no matter how total the entertainment, no matter how seamlessly the noise was maintained from the first moment of waking to the last moment before sleep. That part of you, the part that knows, is the deep human being. It is what was there before the school began its work. It is what will be there after the body returns to the earth. It is the spirit incarnated in this precise life, at this precise moment in history, for a purpose that the caterpillar world cannot name but that the butterfly world knows with complete certainty, to be fully here. To be fully human. To take back, from all the forces that conspired to take it, the life that was always yours. You do not need to be persuaded of any of this. You need only to remember it. The remembering is the awakening. And the awakening is the act. And the act, your specific and irreplaceable candle lit in the specific and irreplaceable darkness of your own life, is the contribution that no one else can make, and that the world cannot afford to be without. The system has spent decades trying to make you forget. This film has spent a few hours trying to help you remember. The question that remains, the only question that has ever mattered, is what you do with the remembering. The answer is not in this film. It is in you. It has always been in you. It was there before you arrived here, and it will be there when you leave. And the only thing that stands between it and the world that needs it is the choice, free, conscious, irreversible, to stop pretending it is not. It is not utopian to believe the world can change for the better. The utopia is believing it can continue as it is. We declare that all human beings are born free, as eminently spiritual beings, and that no organization, no system, no power visible or hidden has the right to prevent them from knowing their own spirit, understanding the true nature of the world, and acting in accordance with that understanding. We declare that we no longer accept the tyranny of the materialist society. It is beneath our dignity as human beings to be forced to live as though we were only these bodies. We do not wish to impose our spiritual convictions on anyone, but we refuse, from this moment, to have materialism imposed on us. We declare that the only genuine democracy is spiritual democracy, a democracy in which neither spirituality is imposed on the atheist nor materialism on the spiritualist. A democracy in which every human being is free, actually free, to live according to what they know themselves to be. We declare that our children are not raw material for economic systems, they are spiritual beings who arrived on this earth carrying everything needed to transform it. Our first responsibility is not to educate them. It is to protect what they already know. We declare that our money, collected through our labor and our taxes, will no longer be used for weapons and wars without our direct and explicit consent. No war should be possible on this earth without a direct referendum of the citizens whose children will fight it. This is not radical. It is the minimum condition of anything deserving to be called democracy. We declare that the system must serve the human being, not the other way around. The weaker humans are kept, the stronger the system grows. The more conscious humans become, the more the system is forced to change. This consciousness is our birthright. We are taking it back. We declare that darkness cannot be removed, it can only be displaced by light. And we choose to be the light. Not because we are certain it will work, but because we are certain that choosing otherwise makes us complicit in the dark. Here is the piece of news that changes the entire emotional register of everything that has been said so far, the piece that shifts the question from "is it possible?" to "what are we waiting for?" The critical mass of awakened people already exists. Not eventually, not almost. Now. The number of human beings on this earth who have already exited the matrix in some meaningful degree, who already know themselves to be more than their bodies, who already feel the pull of the deep human being, who already sense the urgency of this moment and want, with genuine desire, to do something that matters, that number is already sufficient. It has, in all likelihood, already passed the threshold that would trigger a chain reaction, if only the people who comprise it could recognize each other and act together. The problem is not numbers. The problem is isolation. The awakened are everywhere, in every country, every culture, every tradition, every language, and most of them believe they are alone. Most of them have had the experience of waking up in a room full of sleeping people and concluded, from the silence, that they are the only one awake. And so they go on, doing their individual work, making their individual contribution, flickering their individual candle in the darkness, while billions of other individual candles flicker in the same darkness, each invisible to the others, none of them aware of the fire they could collectively become. Meanwhile, those who serve the darkness are not isolated at all. They are organized, focused, and in complete agreement about their objective. Their power does not come from numbers, they are vastly fewer than those who serve the light. Their power comes entirely from unity. And the disorganization of the light, the 1,000 divisions, the 1,000 wounds and sensitivities and convictions that keep the awakened in separate rooms, is not natural. It is manufactured. It is one of the program's most deliberately cultivated achievements. Humanity's boat is sinking while the awakened swim alone toward a shore they cannot reach unless they stop swimming alone, and begin, all of them, to repair the boat together so that everyone can reach the shore safely. Your fragile candle, placed beside billions of other fragile candles, will contribute to the great spiritual fire, the fire that can be seen by all, so that others too may awaken and add their own candle. Alone, each of us flickers faintly in the vast darkness. Together, we can become the midnight sun. The chain reaction does not require a majority. It never has, in any transformation in history. It requires a critical mass, a sufficient number of individually lit candles, close enough together, to begin igniting each other. That threshold has almost certainly already been reached. What is missing is not the candles. It is the knowledge, in each candle, that the others exist. That they are not alone. That the darkness is not as absolute as it appears from the inside of an isolated flame. This is what this film is for. Not to create the awakened, they are already here. To make them visible to each other. To say, you are not alone. You are not a minority. You are not eccentric, or naive, or impractical, or too small. You are the already existing critical mass of the only transformation that can save the world, and the only thing between you and the tipping point is the knowledge that this is true. You began by using the extraordinary power of imagination to build bridges toward all other spiritually awakened people who had exited the Matrix. Each day, you made sure not to let the hours pass without imagining that, in every country, others like you longed for a global movement of re-spiritualization. Especially before falling asleep, you connected, through imagination, with your awakened peers. You did this because you knew that sleep is not merely rest for the body, but the moment in which we live within the spiritual world, free from the constraints of the physical form. Creative imagination, which you used both to connect with others and to first create, on the inner level, possible paths of action, drew forth, as a spiritual consequence, the second great power, inspiration. Through the door opened by imagination, higher-ranked spiritual beings were now able to begin working with you. Not just for you, but together with you. And you then understood that a door you open toward the spiritual beings becomes many other doors they open for you in return. The flow of imagination and inspiration, each feeding the other, each deepening the other, became, with each passing day, the main engine of your life. Gradually, you learned to use these two great inner powers to access the vast treasury of spiritual forces within you. Day by day, you became freer and more fulfilled. Freer, because only now were you truly using your own inner resources. Fulfilled, because only an ever deeper awareness of one's own spiritual essence can give rise to genuine fulfillment. The kind that does not require the next purchase, the next achievement, the next notification. The kind that simply is. What follows is not a program, not a doctrine, not an organization. It is an experiment, the simplest, most serious, and most world-changing experiment ever proposed to a human being. For 30 days, beginning today, remember, as often as possible, every day, that you are a spiritual being. Not as a belief, not as a performance, but as a fact that you hold in your awareness. Return to whenever the noise of the day covers it over. Every evening, before sleep, take 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, use the power of creative imagination to build a bridge toward all the other human beings on this planet who are waking up alongside you. You do not know their names. They are in every country, every language, every tradition. But they are there. Reach toward them. Form the connection in your mind, knowing that in the spiritual world, this forming is real, and the connection is real, and the beings who watch over you see it as the free initiative of a free human being, and respond to it accordingly. Every morning, before the noise begins, take 5 minutes. In those 5 minutes, ask, what can I do today, however small, that serves the deep human being rather than the peripheral one? In myself, in the people I will encounter, in the choices I will make. That is the entire experiment. 30 days, 10 minutes a day, no organization, no membership, no cost. Nothing required except the decision to remember what you are, and to act, in some small way, from that remembering. If enough people do this, if the critical mass is reached of human beings who are consciously, daily, using their spiritual forces in the service of the re-spiritualization of the world, then what the higher beings who watch over us can do with that initiative will be of an order that none of us can currently imagine. Not later, but now. Not eventually, but with a speed that will astonish even those who most believed it was possible. The weaker the human being becomes, the stronger the system grows. The less conscious the human being is, the more tyrannical the system becomes. And in the end, the final stage is reached, the stage in which the system no longer serves the human being at all, but the human being becomes the slave of the system. What the system will never be able to prevent, however, no matter how cleverly it has been designed by those who oppose the unfolding of humanity's natural destiny, is the epidemic spread of the awakening of human spirits. If the living word of awakened people circulates widely enough, more and more people will begin to awaken. And if enough people awaken, then no system, however tyrannical, however meticulously constructed, will be able to stop the full manifestation of the spirit of the deep human being. The night will not end by itself. It never has. Morning does not happen to the world. Morning is made by those who refuse to stop believing in it when it is most completely dark. By those who get up before it arrives and light something small so that others, while waking, have something to navigate by. By caterpillars who remember, at the very last moment, at the absolute edge of the abyss, that they were always something else. Seek them out, those who, even as they walk, kiss the earth with their feet. Seek those who burn like a candle, consuming their own wax in order to shine in this darkness. Seek those who speak to you about what can unite us, not everything that divides us. Seek those who climbed only so as to become steps beneath your feet. Seek those who see truth, goodness, and beauty in you, are not the surrogate of you that the system manufactured. The real you, buried under all that manufacturing, still intact, still alive, still waiting. Beyond the noise of a world rushing to get nowhere, beyond the hatred that poisons the air, beyond the pointlessness of politics that keeps you captive, beyond the thick layer of distraction that drowns every signal from the deep, beyond the soap bubble into which they locked you from birth, there you are. There you always were. The fire is being lit. A few torches at first, as always. Then more. Then from every nation, every culture, every tradition that ever held a living spiritual flame, more still. Until the fire becomes so great, so high, so luminous, that no one on earth can ignore it. Until the long dark night of humanity becomes an effervescent, warm, and radiant spiritual morning. We were never meant to crawl. May we be